Mystery Road.
Tonight, a country in crisis. Protests spread to 25 cities across America over the death of an unarmed African-American man in police custody. Good evening, I'm Jeremy Fernandez. This is ABC News. A new health scare for Ruby Princess passengers. A crew member from its ill-fated voyage tests positive for tuberculosis. A year since Theo AA disappeared from Byron Bay, the Belgian backpacker's family pleads for more information. And still happy despite the result, the joys of watching your team getting thrashed. One of 4 police officers who were involved in the death of an unarmed black man has been charged with his murder. But it's done little to quell the anger that's gripping a deeply divided America. Violent protests have now erupted in at least 25 cities, from Minneapolis, where the governor now concedes they don't have the numbers to control the crowds, to Los Angeles and New York. In Atlanta, protesters levelled their anger at the headquarters of CNN. The National Guard has now joined thousands of police deployed across the country, including in Washington, D.C., where protesters forced the White House into lockdown. From there, our North America correspondent Catherine Diss reports.
Derek Chauvin, the white police officer at the centre of this fury, has been charged with the murder of George Floyd.
We are in the process of continuing to review the evidence. There may be subsequent charges later.
But any thought it would end the protests was soon shattered. The charge of third-degree murder suggests the accused didn't have intent to kill. Many of the protesters dispute that. They also want the other officers charged.
What started as a protest on the streets of Minneapolis over the death of George Floyd has now spilt out into other states, including the Capitol here in Washington, D.C. These hundreds of protesters marched through the centre of the Capitol today to send a message to the person in charge of this deeply divided country.
I want to see the officers held accountable, not just charged, because charges doesn't mean nothing.
Hands up! Don't shoot!
Just metres from the White House, a protester was arrested, sparking the fury of the crowd, forcing the besieged officers to quickly push through the pack to seek safety in a nearby government building. Police and security clearly overwhelmed as the chants and jeers grow louder.
We've just ended at the Capitol building. Police officers have put up temporary barricades, but they've told us that they're outnumbered and they're concerned that the demonstrators will breach the lines.
They later returned to the White House, where additional protections were in place at the seat of power in the United States. In Atlanta, CNN headquarters was attacked. The news network is despised by Trump supporters. It followed an extraordinary moment captured live on air when a black CNN reporter was arrested covering the unrest in Minneapolis.
Okay. Do you mind telling me why I'm under arrest, sir? Why am I under arrest, sir?
After intervention from the state's governor, the reporter and crew were released. Amid the chaos in Kentucky's biggest city, a reporter in Louisville was seemingly targeted by police firing pepper balls.
Shot! I'm getting...
Katie, are you okay?
It's like directly at us. Directly.
Why are they doing that?
He's shooting at our crew.
I don't know.
Do they not know that obviously they see the camera?
There were also ugly scenes at protests in New York. Chilling details of George Floyd's final moments were revealed, sparking more outcry. Police said Mr. Chauvin had his knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Almost 3 minutes of that, Mr. Floyd was non-responsive. The medical examiner concluded he most likely died from a combination of being restrained, an underlying health condition and intoxicants in his system, finding no evidence his death was caused by strangulation or suffocation. Donald Trump has rejected claims by Twitter that one of his tweets was glorifying violence.
You tweeted, "When the looting starts,
the shooting starts. How would you know that phrase and not know its racially charged history?
Well, I've heard that phrase for a long time. I don't know where it came from.
In parts of Minneapolis, the National Guard, state and local police are nowhere to be seen as protesters ignore a curfew and continue to vent their rage. Authorities seem to have no way of stopping their momentum. Catherine Diss, ABC News, Washington.
There's been another health scare involving the Ruby Princess cruise ship. Jessie Dorset is at the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital in Sydney. Jessie, it seems a crew member has now been diagnosed with tuberculosis.
Yeah, Jez, the man was brought here to the RPA after the Ruby Princess docked in Sydney more than 2 months ago. He's been diagnosed with tuberculosis this week, a disease that can be dormant for months or even years. New South Wales Health has written to the thousands of passengers that were on board that cruise. Some have shared that letter with us, but it doesn't reveal where the man was working on board. Of course, we know about the Ruby Princess. We've heard so much about it because of coronavirus. More than 700 cases linked to the ship, and police are investigating that outbreak. But an expert health panel has determined that the risk of passengers being infected with tuberculosis on board was very low.
In contrast to COVID, which requires only brief contact, to be infected with tuberculosis, prolonged close contact is usually required, and so therefore we focus on screening people who've had that degree of contact.
The man's close contacts include hospital staff and other crew members, so they'll be screened for tuberculosis if necessary. Jez, Australia has one of the lowest TB rates in the world, 5 or 6 per 100,000, and there are antibiotics to treat the disease.
Jessie Dorset reporting from RPA. Well, for just the second time since the coronavirus pandemic began, New South Wales has recorded no new cases. In the past 24 hours, more than 9,400 tests were done in New South Wales, and all of them came back negative. That's the first time in more than a fortnight that we've seen that elusive zero. So the total number of infections in the state sits at 3,092. The vast majority of those, more than 85% of patients, have recovered. New South Wales Health tells us it's now treating 71 people. One of those is in intensive care, and that person no longer needs a ventilator. There are just 2 patients in the whole country using the breathing machines. Around Australia, there's been a total of 11 new COVID-19 cases, all of them in Victoria. Well, his country might be descending further into chaos, but Donald Trump hasn't shifted his focus from China. The US president has doubled down on blaming Beijing for the soaring COVID-19 death toll in the US and taken aim over its latest power play in Hong Kong. Here's our chief foreign correspondent, Philip Williams.
President Trump chose the White House Rose Garden for his latest China tirade, no flowers, all thorns.
China raided our factories, offshored our jobs, gutted our industries, stole our intellectual property.
The president announced he was revoking Hong Kong's preferential trade and travel treatment following Beijing's new security laws covering the territory.
China has replaced its promised formula of one country, 2 systems with one country, 1 system.
But there was more. Mr. Trump doubling down on his accusations China was responsible for the spread of COVID-19.
China's cover-up of the Wuhan virus allowed the disease to spread all over the world, instigating a global pandemic that has cost more than 100,000 American lives.
And he's pulling the US out of the World Health Organization, saying it was complicit in a Chinese COVID cover-up. In better days, a bromance had blossomed between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. That now appears dead and buried, and the Chinese are threatening unspecified retaliation.
If the US insists on jeopardising China's interests, China will definitely take all necessary measures to fight back.
That may include a revision of the tariff truce struck between the US and China in January that was supposed to see Beijing import billions of dollars worth of American agricultural products at the possible expense of Australian farmers. It's clear President Trump is going to go after China from all directions. It's part of his re-election strategy that critics argue is a deliberate distraction from his own failures to suppress COVID-19. So far, the two-way tension has been expressed mainly in words, but as the November presidential election nears, expect those pressures to build and to boil, and Australia may not be immune from the consequences. Philip Williams, ABC News, Canberra.
A $700 million backdown won't be enough to silence the victims of the government's Centrelink robo-debt saga. The money will be refunded to more than 300,000 people who were wrongly chased for debts, but some of them are demanding an apology and compensation. Here's National Affairs correspondent Greg Jennett.
Looking back on it now, robo-debt's a doubly painful memory for Betsy.
Obviously, I was terrified. I wasn't quite in my right mind. I didn't even think about my rights.
Debt collectors had got to her at a delicate time, deep in an oxy-opioid haze, just hours after gallbladder surgery.
He said, well, if you don't agree to a payment agreement, we will have to forward this to the police.
Now working for a government she doesn't want to broadcast her full name, but events suddenly took a turn for the better yesterday. A refund of around $3,000 will be coming Betsy's way.
I was pretty elated. I imagine a lot of people were very, very happy.
Around 370,000 people will share in robo-debt refunds, and some of them, Betsy included, may pursue compensation for their troubles. Why? Because the government used computers to average incomes and assume Centrelink debts were owed, in what law professor Terry Carney likens to a primary school level mathematical blunder.
A single, and Don reaches the 100.
Assuming that, because Bradman had an average of 99.94, that every time he went out to bat he made 99.94 runs. It really was as ludicrous as that.
The refunds mean Minister Stuart Roberts sitting on a robo-debt duck short of $720 million.
Well, of course the government should apologise. This is a humiliation of this government and this minister yet again.
I am by no means saying that we shouldn't support individuals in their time of need. But I'm certainly not going to apologise for government oversight.
There's been no apology, either for wrongly pursuing money in the first place,
I have the right numbers,
or for the timing of the minister's backdown, with short notice in a Gold Coast park on a Friday afternoon.
What should be over is Stuart Roberts' career.
Every day that ends in Y, there is scrutiny. There is media scrutiny.
In making the repayments, the government's trying to clear the robo-debt debacle from its books, but is in no way certain this will be the end of it. A class action's continuing, and a settlement involving more taxpayers' money appears likely, because the government knows its legal position is shaky in the extreme. Greg Jennett, ABC News, Canberra.
A man has died and a woman has been killed after a domestic violence-fuelled double stabbing in Sydney's west. A 22-year-old woman was found outside a home in Bidwell this afternoon, suffering multiple stab wounds to her stomach. Police say a 22-year-old man who was known to the woman attacked her before injuring himself. He was found dead inside the home with stab wounds to his chest. The woman was flown to hospital where she later died. Police are treating the incident as murder-suicide. On the first anniversary of his disappearance, the family of the Belgian backpacker Theo Aye believes someone has crucial information that could reveal what really happened to him. Police suspect the teenager died in an accident after leaving a nightclub in Byron Bay. But his godfather claims there's not enough evidence to support that conclusion. Here's crime reporter Mark Reddy.
From adventure to immense sorrow, as the family of this Belgian backpacker struggle to swallow a dark reality.
He was instead of he is. But look, he's an amazing young man, and really all the moments that we spend together are really good memories.
Theo Aye was wrapping up his Australian odyssey when he vanished a year ago. The 18-year-old was last seen here, leaving a popular nightclub in Byron Bay. Instead of going back to his hostel, he went the other way, towards a lighthouse. After almost 6 months, police called off the search, and then volunteers found this.
It's nearly 100% confirmation that it was Theo's hair and so Theo's cap.
The cap was found in remote bushland near Tallow Beach. The likely theory, according to police, was Theo Ayer fell from cliffs and was swept away in rough seas, but his family isn't convinced.
We believe that he was not alone. He was most probably with somebody who knew the place.
And while time has gone by, the dedication from some locals is yet to fade. They're working on a social media campaign to widen the appeal for information.
Byron is such a transient place, and there may have been travellers here at the time that he went missing who are unaware that they are holding crucial information.
Even though police suspect Theo Ayer died from an accident, it will ultimately be up to the coroner to try and work out exactly what happened to him. An inquest will be held here in Western Sydney with a date yet to be announced.
The whole Byron community has felt the presumed loss of this young man.
Not knowing is the biggest torture of them all.
A feeling that extends overseas to Belgium, where the anxious wait for answers continues for his parents and little brother. Mark Reddy, ABC News.
The Australian Maritime Safety Authority has laid charges against the master of a ship which lost around 50 containers off the coast of Sydney. Items from the containers that came off the APL England was hit when it was hit with rough seas included face masks and takeaway containers. Debris has been washing up on a number of Sydney beaches and as far north as the Central Coast. The charges relate to pollution and damage of the marine environment due to poor cargo loading. Parramatta is in the middle of a development explosion. There are high-rises climbing as far as the eye can see and a light rail project being built through its CBD. But some locals are worried about what's coming down to allow the new buildings to go up. And Parramatta's iconic rugby league shop is in the firing line. Lydia Feng reports.
Go Para, great win.
As Eels fans celebrate this week's victory, there's fear they may lose one of their most beloved stores. Peter Wynn's Score in the heart of Parramatta could face the wrecking ball if a multi-storey hotel, office and retail development proposal gets the go-ahead from council.
Just got to face reality, whatever comes. You know, certainly going to be some tough decisions for me to make in the near future.
Parramatta Eels legend Peter Wynn opened the store more than 30 years ago. It's been a mecca for rugby league fans ever since.
It'd be such a loss to the city of Parramatta and yeah, you can always come in here and just feel at home and enjoy the rugby league feel.
The development proposal is still in its early days and it will need to be officially approved by the New South Wales Department of Planning. If it does go ahead, it will be one of many developments that's dramatically changing the face of Parramatta's landscape and skyline.
Just last week, demolition began on the 200-year-old Royal Oak Hotel to make way for the Parramatta Light Rail.
We need to build a city here for the people, the 2 million people that live in Western Sydney, and that means new investment, new jobs and new cultural opportunities.
But residents say that's come at the expense of the city's culture and heritage.
I think it's far too quickly redeveloping Parramatta, and Parramatta's lost its character, and I think it's a sad day that the history of Parramatta has been forgotten and overshadowed by all this high-rise development.
Building for the future, but at what cost? Lydia Feng, ABC News, Sydney.
Turning back overseas, deaths from coronavirus have surged in Russia, Brazil and the United States. Russia has reported a record 232 deaths over the past day, but it's still unclear how fatalities are being recorded there. Brazil and the US both announced the deaths of more than 1,000 people in a single day. New cases of infection are in the tens of thousands. Meanwhile, in the UK, medical authorities reported more than 2,000 new cases of the virus in the past day. Its death toll for the same period was over 300. Another casualty of the pandemic in the UK is the centuries-old British institution of the local pub. 70 million pints of beers being poured down the drain because pubs are still in lockdown. It's feared as many as 10,000 pubs could shut down permanently, even if the trading ban were to be lifted. Europe correspondent Samantha Hawley reports from London.
Lifeless and without soul. This is a British institution like it's never been seen before. For hundreds of years, it served as a place of solace in times of deep crisis. But it has no role now.
We've got pubs that have survived 2 world wars, a global economic recession, but they're genuinely worried about whether they'll survive coronavirus.
The beers stopped flowing and livelihoods are at risk. Publican Esther Sutton is trying to hold on.
My deepest concern is because me and the kids live here, so I was just been, sort of terrified that we're going to not only lose our livelihood but also lose our home as well.
Pubs were already struggling to survive. Now it's thought 30 million pints worth of beer will be wasted.
I have had to throw about 3 casks away, so that's like probably, nigh on 300 pints that's had to go down the drain, which is heartbreaking for anyone.
Publicans are hopeful that some pubs could reopen in July, but many could be closed until Christmas. And the industry warns 10,000 won't last that long, as history is wiped away.
But even if some pubs do reopen, it'll be some time before patrons can pack the bars again, like they've done for centuries. Samantha Hawley, ABC News, London.
It's likely to be many more months before Australian musicians can travel for performances, putting serious doubts on the livelihood of artists. In place of gigs, there are high-quality live streams, but so far musicians are struggling to turn a profit from online concerts.
Alex Leahy was really hoping to start 2020 on the right note.
I was actually in LA, just about to go on tour through Europe when I had to immediately come home.
Trying not to be downbeat, the young Aussie artist got on the live streaming bandwagon early, but it's no financial substitute for the real thing.
Touring is actually perhaps takes up the biggest portion of revenue for my business. So the flow-on effect for me losing my work as a touring artist is also felt by a number of other people who work alongside me and with me.
In past months, festivals and gigs have changed tune, replaced with social media substitutes.
Hi Mum, if you're watching. Miss you.
But fans have been left wanting a better quality of show. Enter full-scale live studio productions with COVID-safe camera and sound crew. The challenge is trying to make money to cover costs, let alone make an income.
The philanthropic venture of the Isolate Late Show is not sustainable for the 25 artists that we're working with every week.
This Brisbane-based live stream variety show was born from pandemic closures. It's currently on break, drumming up ways to compensate those involved.
It's definitely a challenge to find creative ways to monetise projects like this.
We're seeing a lot of artists start to use Facebook or Instagram or YouTube for live streams, but they're kind of having to give it away and ask for donations at best.
One way to fill the void, tech companies building platforms allowing artists to set up their own high-quality secure streams and pass costs onto fans.
We just thought there'd be an opportunity to continue treating the arts as a business and not as a charity case.
Testing.
This Sydney bar is trialling streamed gigs. They're charging $10 a ticket, with proceeds split between the crew, band and bar.
People are warming to it. People have probably got a 6-pack of beer in front of them and they're sitting back and enjoying the shows.
While some states and territories have funding available to support creatives with streaming, the consensus is a massive financial boost is needed to help artists survive the coming months, if not years, till large-scale venues can reopen. To fill that void, virtual audiences will need to put their money where their mouth is. Tim Swanston, ABC News, Brisbane.
The New Zealand Warriors have celebrated a return to the NRL with their first win of the season. In a near-perfect performance, the Warriors thrashed St George Illawarra 18-0 in Gosford. The result keeps the Dragons winless. However, many of their sport-deprived fans are just happy the footy's back.
Simon Jones admits he felt lost when rugby league was cancelled.
There's been a lot of replays on and we've watched a lot of old Dragons games, but there's nothing like going to the game. There's nothing like being with your Dragon family, your friends.
He couldn't think of a better way to celebrate his birthday than watching his beloved Dragons even if it's just on TV.
Oh, look, it couldn't have been a better present. Stoked.
He wouldn't have liked what he saw early. The Warriors up 12-0 after 26 minutes.
He crashes across the line.
It went from bad to worse for the Dragons after the break,
Nicarima needs nobody.
as the flawless Warriors went on to create NRL history, completing their first 44 sets of the match without error.
We just want to play tough and just play for the middle and just grind teams down, and I'm hoping that's what you saw.
Premiers the Roosters secured their first win of the season, beating arch-rival South Sydney by 16 points.
Morris pulls him down as well. That's a brilliant piece of defence.
The attitude that we gave was Roosters' defence. I think it was rock solid.
Latrell Mitchell had a mixed performance in his first match against his old team. Reigning Dally M medalist James Tedesco confirmed his status as the best fullback in the game.
James Tedesco.
Daniela Intilli, ABC News.
The FFA boss, James Johnson, is hoping to settle on a date within the next few weeks to restart the A-League competition. Players and clubs have agreed to get underway in mid-July, but the game's broadcast partner, Foxtel, will have the final say.
Since it launched 15 years ago, the A-League has been part of pay TV.
Yes!
Now, with live sport viewership up, FFA boss James Johnson is pitching a product for these unusual times.
Where people are at home, I think our fans will react very positively to being able to watch effectively one match per day over a month period.
Fight saved by Izzo, but he can't keep out the follow-up.
The game wants to stage the last 32 fixtures of the season in just 35 days. After the club said yes to a proposed hub model and the players agreed to a pay cut, one tough negotiation looms.
The final piece of the jigsaw puzzle is getting Fox Sports to give us the green light. The players start training mid-June, so I'm hoping before then we will be able to announce that.
There are still 3 years to run on Foxtel's existing deal.
For them, at the moment, they've starved their viewers of content, and we're going to be able to deliver them a lot more content in a short space of time.
It's very much a buyer's market in the world of sports rights at the moment. Last week, the NRL reportedly heavily discounted its $1.9 billion deal with Foxtel and Nine. And with the rights for a new Australian domestic rugby competition also being renegotiated, the FFA will be hard-pressed to get anywhere near the $57 million a year it usually receives.
We have a lot of challenges as a result of COVID as a sport at the moment.
Another will be a cluttered schedule featuring little rest.
It's going to be difficult for the players to back up every 3 days, but look, these guys are professional athletes, they're great at what they do, and the sooner we get going, the better.
The players say they agreed to secure the game's future.
Dreams have come true!
Patrick Galloway, ABC News.
Let's take a look at the weather now. A mostly clear day in Sydney with a top of 20 degrees today after an overnight low of 11. Mostly clear skies around the state led to lower than average temperatures overnight. It was partly cloudy in the state's northeast and there have been a few showers mainly in the northern rivers. It was dry and mostly sunny elsewhere with daytime temperatures close to average. Perth, Adelaide and Canberra were the only capitals to have received showers today. A trough and front are tonight generating rain and storms in central and southern parts of the continent. The cold front sweeps across New South Wales late tomorrow and on Monday, bringing some gusty winds, showers and the odd storm. From tomorrow, we'll start to see those showers intensifying in Adelaide, extending to Melbourne and possibly Hobart. It'll be partly cloudy in Canberra and Brisbane. Any showers in northeastern New South Wales tonight will largely clear tomorrow, but there's a slight chance of more showers near the Queensland border. Otherwise, mostly sunny after some early fog. On the water, winds will remain light and variable. There'll also be early fog in the southeast, leading to a partly cloudy day. On the water, winds will generally be light and north to northwesterly. There'll be a shower or two about the southern inland and ranges tomorrow, most likely near the Victorian border. There'll be snow on the Alps above 1,800 metres. In Sydney, winds will generally remain northerly with seas to 1.5 metres on an easterly swell. It'll be partly cloudy in Sydney after some morning fog. Overnight lows between 7 in Richmond and 12 in the city. Tops about 21 to 22 degrees in the metro area. By Tuesday, conditions become chilly again. Daytime temperatures plummeting with the arrival of that cold front on the coast. There's a slight chance of showers in the first half of next week. And that is the very latest from the ABC News team. Thanks for your company. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Next on ABC A Dive View, the dynamic duo are back with another